John Victor. Hey, you old rich guy. John, rich old rich overpaid. Make the picture quick.
Wait, one more. Everybody, fist. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, we're done.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Good job.
Sorry.
All right, now we're going to move to our 3 in-person panelists. We'll have them go through some introductions, and then we'll open it up to questions for the whole panel in general. All right, why don't we start with President Mulkey?
Hi folks, I'm Stephen Mulkey, I'm president of Unity College. When we started the divestment process, it was at the urging of a member of the community who was familiar with 350.org's initiative that was coming down the pike. And so I started poking around a little and asked the question, are we indeed invested, and if so, how much, and what would it take to divest? I actually, based on our experience, I actually disagree a little bit with Bill McKibben. This has not been that hard, and it's actually been relatively straightforward. One of the things that we have as an advantage is that our endowment is invested via exchange-traded funds, and these things have 2 advantages. Number one is they're very diverse and growing all the time in terms of the nature of those exchange-traded funds. There's a lot of different products out there. Number 2, they're very transparent. We know exactly what's in them. So given that we've got 5 years to move this, and in fact we're moving much faster than 5 years, we can progressively bias our selection of those funds, which are as commingled as mutual funds are, away from those top 200 companies to minimize our exposure to those top 200 companies. Now, are we going to get to dead zero? Probably not, but one of the things that we can do is we can get so close to zero that any return that we do get will be trivial, and we can roll it right into our sustainability fund on campus so that we're working further with that money to reduce our carbon footprint. I guess I take issue with the notion that there could be an opportunity cost. Well, yeah, there could be an opportunity cost. There's an opportunity cost to not being invested in blood diamonds from Africa. Is that ethical? Is that something you want Bowdoin to be known for? It's not something that I want my institution to be known for, you know. So let's say, for example, there's a time when fossil fuel prices skyrocket, and anybody that's invested in them at that time is going to have an enormous return. Do you want Bowdoin at the table for that? I don't want my institution at the table.
I just want everybody to realize that if there's costs, that there needs to be shared sacrifice then as well.
I understand that, and
it's like it's kind of like let's demonize oil and gas, and maybe they deserve it better than anyone else. Okay, but this isn't what's really needed. What's really needed is to stop consuming so much fossil fuels.
We need leadership from the top. There's no question about that. And I agree with Bill McKibben that really what's happening here is we're removing their social license. If you have conservative boards of trustees from around the nation that are voting to divest, that sends a powerful signal forward. Divestment is not the end-all and be-all. It's not the only way forward. But if not now, when? And if not this, what mechanism will you use? And how will you start? What will you get started with? You know, the bottom line for us is that we really believe strongly that we need to be approaching sustainability from all 3 axes of the institution. One is our investment policy, number 1, and we're talking about that tonight. Number 2 is our operations, and we have, just like Bowdoin does, we have numerous sustainability features to our physical operations that minimize our carbon footprint. But also extremely important is our academic program. We have adopted sustainability science as outlined by the U.S. National Academy as a framework for our entire academic portfolio of profiles, of programs. And this is, we think, probably the most important thing that we can be engaged in. Divestment is part of that entire package, and it puts us in a stance. It actually makes a statement about who we are. I just recently gave a talk at the Sustainable Development Summit in Delhi, which is organized by R.K. Pachari, whom we know as the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I spoke very clearly about the mission of higher education in this century. And that is, I believe that we have an ethical obligation to give the tools to this generation of students to face the sustainability challenges that are heading at them with the speed of a freight train. We've got to get them ready, and we're failing in that. We're not doing it. Divestment is just one part of the entire package. I believe it's an important part of the package because of the strong social signal that it sends, at least as much as the financial impact that it has. Demonizing the fossil fuel companies, I dare say there is an argument for that. They have in fact invested millions of dollars through front companies that have just been revealed, and actually we've known about them through other sources for quite a number of years now. Tens of millions of dollars over the last several years to fund the disinformation campaign in the United States and elsewhere, in Europe and elsewhere. So this is, yeah, there's a rationale for that, and I would think a compelling rationale. I think we need to really get down to talk about causes and conditions, and at the center of that are the ethics. And there's a huge ethical issue here. For us and for me, this is the biggest issue there is. This is not just another whim of the student body saying, you should divest from Monsanto. No, I don't think so. This issue is so big that it really is the central determinant of the environmental characteristics of this century. It is the central determinant of the survival of civilization toward the end of this century. Right now we're in a situation where there's absolutely no question that students in college today will progressively experience toward the second half of their life a dangerously disrupted climate. And there's not a thing on earth we can do to stop that freight train. That energy is laid down in the oceans, and it's going to be elaborated over the next 30 to 40 years. What we can do is use this narrow window of opportunity that we have right now to ensure the survival of my grandchildren, your children, the students in college today. I could go on, but I really feel passionately about this on all three of those axes, and divestment is just one.
Brugger, if you'd like to speak.
I think this last weekend in Washington showed what a great movement we have started to build. I've been reading Marshall Gantz's book on the farm workers, and in the chapter heading Before the Delano strike and march to Sacramento, he has a tremendous quote from William Shakespeare, and it also relates to the ocean, so I thought it would be good to bring down to here in Bowdoin. And it says, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which when taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures." That is exactly where we are today, and we really have to act that way. And divestment in Maine is really moving forward. We are in a flood tide. I can stand here today and say I spoke to a student at COA, and on Tuesday he's meeting with the administration, and COA will join Unity College in signing on to divesting. Maine will have 2 of the 4 companies in the United States that have signed on to this campaign completely. We are leaders in this. And as the coordinator of divestment in Maine, I can tell you that there are equally good groups working at Bates, at Colby, and at the University of Maine system. The University of Maine system is huge. It covers 7 campuses. you can imagine the amount of people that are going to have to be out there collecting signatures and working on this. And each one of those people represent an individual conversation about fossil fuels and about the crisis we're facing. We are building a movement, and it is very exciting to be part of. Beyond the colleges, I'm sure all of you have this idea of what a pension fund is, but you realize that just within the Maine State Employees Pension Fund, there are $10 billion invested. That's an incredible sum of money. And there's a bill in front of the legislature to divest that fund of fossil fuels. And a number of people have signed on, financial experts, pensioners, Stephen, to testify and try to get the legislature to pass that bill. Just to give you an idea of what's at stake there, $101 million of that pension fund is in ExxonMobil.
How much?
$101 million. $65 million is in Chevron. We can make a difference if we take that on. It's going to be a hard fight. I certainly hope anybody here in the audience who wants to testify or has a stake in that pension fund can come up to me afterwards. I'd love to sign you up. It's very important to do. Also within the state of Maine, there's a lot of faith-based work being done on this. I'm most familiar with the work of the Unitarian Universalist Church. Different congregations have taken it to the Unitarian Universalists of America. You would think a church like that would have steered away from fossil fuels, or at least would have been aware of it by now. That these were things that they probably, as Stephen says, are pretty ethically wrong for a church to be having. But no, they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in groups like Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and a lot of the infrastructure that is involved in that. So there's a lot going on with divestment. It's a huge movement, and what I'm most excited about is that it's building a movement to solve the climate crisis. Thank you.
Now Glen Brand from the Sierra Club branch, the Maine branch of Sierra Club.
That's good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Glen Brand. I am the chapter director of the Sierra Club in Maine, and I want to give the national and state Sierra Club's perspective on divestment and the larger context. For those of you who do not know, the Sierra Club was founded in 1892. It's the nation's largest and oldest environmental organization. The Sierra Club chapter has more than 8,000 members and supporters across the state, and we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. I'll encourage everybody to learn more about our work and our activities. You can check out our webpage at maine.sierraclub.org and check out our Facebook page and give us a like. I appreciate that. I want to begin by re-emphasizing a hard fact, and that's why we're talking about something as dramatic as divestment. And that's the climate crisis is an overarching national and global problem that requires not just urgent, but systemic urgent action. And that's an important part of the problem here. The simple fact is that business as usual will be catastrophic for millions around the globe. Our top campaign, both nationally and in Maine, is to transition to a cleaner fossil fuel energy economy as soon and as smoothly as possible. We are working in coalition with hundreds of other organizations and groups to wean our nation off dangerous and expensive dependence on fossil fuels. That's why Sierra Club is mounting a major national campaign, shutting down hundreds of existing coal-fired power plants around the country. And that includes 1/3 of the remaining on-campus coal plants nationwide. We're working to stop the Keystone XL pipeline and also the Exxon pipeline that would carry tar sands through northern New England and through Maine. And I think more generally, we're working to implement, this is a large category, meaningful policies across the board, laws to dramatically scale up renewable power like wind and solar to replace our dependence on coal, oil, natural gas, and other fossil fuels. It's why the Sierra Club and 350 joined together to organize the largest climate rally and march ever in Washington last weekend. I was there, Reed was there, Stephen was there. Considering the challenge, it is worth saying that we've made very little progress. I think we can point to some positive steps, but nowhere near to deal with the scale and scope and the cost of the problem of climate disruption. So we think as an organization that we have to move forward on climate starting yesterday, but clearly immediately. Now, to meet the challenge, the climate movement is utilizing a wide range of strategic tools. Includes, and this is a partial list, but grassroots organizing, mass mobilization like the rally in DC, education, science and social science research, media, public pressure, political pressure, electoral politics, legal action, technology, finance, and yes, corporate campaigns. No tactic, obviously, alone will get us where we need to be. This is something that Bill said, all of us understand that. Shutting down hundreds of coal plants is not enough. Stopping the Keystone XL pipeline, the Northeast Tar Sands pipeline projects are clearly not enough. Mobilizing all 50,000 people in the mall is not enough. Electing and re-electing President Obama is not enough. Even putting a cost on carbon or setting carbon limits on power plants are not enough. These are, and dozens of other single actions, no matter how important by themselves, are what logicians would call necessary but not sufficient. We must and we are pursuing all of these strategies and others simultaneously and strategically. Now, Sierra Club agrees with Bill McKibben and others that a significant and perhaps deciding obstacle to political and policy progress on climate is the extraordinary wealth and power of the fossil fuel corporations. In the history, in the environmental and social justice movements, there's a rich history of corporate campaigns targeting bad acting corporations. Some of the most effective corporate pressure and accountability tactics include boycotts, so to speak, shareholder actions, rebranding efforts, and of course divestment. And Sierra Club strongly supports fossil fuel divestment, especially at influential institutions like colleges, like Bowdoin, because it does a number of things simultaneously. It educates and mobilizes people. Clearly that is happening here. It sends a clear message to a variety of markets. It helps to redirect investment to cleaner energy markets. And as several have said, it begins to undermine the social capital and the sway of the corporate fuel sector. As I said earlier, divestment is a dramatic tactic, but I believe that the climate crisis demands that in President Lincoln's famous words, that we disenthrall ourselves from the enormous hold that the fossil fuel industry has on our world. And I'll end with this because it so aptly describes the context of the discussion tonight, and just in case not everyone has heard these memorable words, I'd like to conclude by quoting the larger passage from which the Lincoln's disenthrall quote comes. President Lincoln, in his second State of the Union address in 1862, told Congress and the nation, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." Thank you.
Yes.
My son is 30 years old. When he was a junior in high school, he was a debater, and the topic that year for national high school students was climate change. One evening I remember him asking me, "Dad, what do you think of climate change?" And I said, "Well, I think it's going to be bad. What do you think?" And he said, "For my generation, it's going to be bad, but I pity those that come after me." And in that moment, he had the saddest look on his face that I've ever seen in my life. I'm additionally very sad tonight to hear an old man who has a good salary at this institution try to put money and profits ahead of the future generations. I think it's a wrong-headed priority. I'm reminded by what the native people said about the white man when the white people came to this continent. The natives said that the white man was blinded by his love for the green frog skin, the dollar bill. He couldn't see beyond it. He couldn't see that his connection to nature was being destroyed.
I'd like to make sure that we reserve this to questions to our panelists. Professor Lichter is a professor of mine, and I do not. And I'm very happy that he came out here to hear people speak. I invited all of those who disagree to make sure that we have a dialogue and have questions and answers. Any questions for the panelists? Professor Lichter?
How much of the federal budget goes for oil and gas subsidies, and is there each year? And is there just how politically difficult would it be to get rid of those? Because I think that's
Difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that would be the most effective step to take to get the price of oil higher.
Yeah, we're talking about billions of dollars, certainly. I haven't actually seen the numbers recently, but the numbers are huge.
It's $6 billion.
$6 billion,
Yeah.
thank you.
Some people say 7, it depends how you look at the numbers.
So that's almost the entire National Science Foundation budget.
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess certainly I agree with you, but I'll echo my previous sentiment. If not now, when? If not this issue, which issue is it? We should be moving forward on all fronts. We have an owned Congress. Full stop, period. They're owned. Okay, so in order for us to move this situation beyond those subsidies, we're going to have to make some very strong political statements from all over the country, from all sectors, in order to get that to happen. There's certainly the new Secretary of State is making some positive noises that sound very affirming, very strong, very clear. The President has said the right words. Now let's see if the right action is there. So I guess I don't have an answer to your point about subsidies. I think there's really two things to say. Number one is we should demand that those subsidies be discontinued, and at the same time we should ask that we have renewed massive investment in renewables and energy storage and new clean technology.
One thing I'll add about this is the reality in Congress is that the House of Representatives almost certainly will block any efforts to do anything meaningful like you're talking about for the next 2-4 years. This would much less something like a carbon tax or whatever fantasies we might have to deal with the problem. But the President can do quite a bit. He can do something extremely meaningful with the stroke of his pen without Congress. He will not do that unless there is real mounting public pressure. He can, for example, as he already has for new coal-fired power plants and new power plants, he can put carbon limits through EPA. And we're expecting and we're demanding that he do this for existing power plants. This is something he can do. He can by himself say no to the Keystone XL pipeline. He can by himself say no to the Tar Sands pipeline. So those are meaningful things, but to the scale of the problem, no. So we cannot, if the idea here is to wait until we get that Congress, that fantasy Congress, that's not a plan.
I'm Heidi Brugger. I'm with 350 Maine, and actually 350.org had a campaign to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies. And it was so difficult to get off the ground that I think that's where the divestment plan started, because the idea is to, remove their social acceptability. That provides more pressure to our congressional representatives so that maybe we can get some action, even from an owned Congress. But the subsidy thing was something that was thought of first, and we just couldn't get any traction.
Any more questions?
Actually, my name is Nat Wheelwright. I'm also on faculty here at Bowdoin in the biology department and environmental studies program. And this is really a comment more than a question, and actually a shout out more than a comment. And that is a shout out to Bridgett and Matthew Goodrich and the many students who are here tonight despite their incredibly full schedules. Bowdoin has a bit of a rap that I've heard as being a hotbed of social rest. and you're proving it, you're proving that every so often a generation of students comes along and make a difference, and I think you really will. So thank you for putting this together, and get your roommates out and yeah, spread the word.
Well, I guess if no one else is going to ask some questions, I'll bide some time unless we have very pressing needs. But I guess for President Mulkey, people, if we do divest and we do lose returns, people are going to say, blame it on divestment. And how can we justify divesting for the sake of climate change and justify our decreased returns, perhaps our inability to pay as much, to pay our professors as much, to give our students as much financial aid as they have in the past? Is that a justification that we can make?
Actually, my response to that is twofold. One, let's examine the assumptions of the question. Will it in fact be possible to point to divestment as the cause of losing return on your investment? I don't think it will be. You don't simply roll out the 200 fossil fuel companies and then proceed with the same portfolio with those missing. You actually create a strategic plan. Just last week we talked to our investment firm, which is Spinnaker in Portland, and they're very interested in working with any group that would like to divest. They have the capacity to advise on that. And I asked the lead investor, I said, what really is the determining factor here? And she said, willingness. Willingness is the main thing that's determining whether or not you go forward. Secondly, I want to point out that there is a rich literature now within the investment community, within the financial community, that has for many years now been asking the question, what is the financial cost of socially screened investments? And the answer is there is no reason to believe whatsoever that they will lose money because of that social screening. Now, could you lose money? Yeah. The market goes up and down. There are a lot of reasons why you may not perform as well. But is the divestment act itself likely to be the cause of it? I think that would be a really hard case to make if you have any intelligence at all running your investments. Really, these guys are experts, and this is very complex. When they go to sit down and decide how to manage your portfolio, they're making decisions on a daily basis that meet a strategic process. Their tactics are designed within a strategic understanding of where they want to position your portfolio. And it's not just a matter of Xing out those 200 companies. It's a very strategic process that has a lot of important considerations to replace what you're taking out.
Any questions back?
Yeah, I'll quickly add that there's a real body of scholarship on this issue. A lot of it started, I think, early on with tobacco. The other sort of sin screens that a lot of portfolios have gone through. There's a lot of research on what happened with tobacco, which was an enormously profitable, still is, enormously profitable industry. And so there is history of this, and the general conclusion is that there's very minimal loss that was, but over a short period of time and over a longer period of time, it's actually gained. Of course, it depends on how well it was managed. There are a lot of variables.
You know, I put it quickly, if indeed we are in a carbon bubble and we reach a consensus globally, we hope this happens, that in fact we need to leave this carbon in the ground, you would be well positioned to be as far away from those companies as you possibly can right now.
Hi, Stephen. Stephen, this is a question for you. What is Unity College doing to research socially and environmentally responsible companies and like solar and wind power to replace the oil companies that you've taken out?
Yeah, no, well, it's oil and coal, and it's the top 200 that have been recommended by 350.org that we've addressed. And by the way, there may be a better list than that, but that's the one we're working with right now, and I think that list bears inspection. We need to take a hard look at it. We actually have gone to Spinnaker, and we've asked them to manage that for us. And we've always had a proactive stance on green energy. One thing that's really important to say right here in this context is that investment in green energy is not paying off. It gives a really low return. And to think that you could replace your fossil fuel portfolio with a green energy portfolio and get anywhere near the same return with that is naive at this point in time. You will not. However, there is a day coming when I firmly believe that you will. So it's really not a matter of just ethically divesting, but it's also a matter of asking the question, how much do you want to support industries that are publicly traded, that are in fact producing the green, clean energy future that we want? I do believe their day will come, and most financial analysts that I've talked to who care about socially responsible investing also say that. But it's not now, and it's because of the structure of the market right now. If you look at what drives the fossil fuel industry in the marketplace, it is all financial. There is nothing ethical, or there is no constraints on the fossil fuel industry whatsoever, other than what the market is driving it toward. So the market itself is determining what's happening here. So Spinnaker is understanding what kind of portfolio to create as we progressively minimize our exposure to those top 200. We have always had a strong portfolio in green energy and clean energy, and we will maintain that. However, it's really important to point out that we have an economic problem with that in this country right now. All of our subsidies are supporting something that's destroying civilization, and those things that could save it are not giving us a good return on investment, and we need to invest in them.
I'd like to add a little something on that also, in that there is also what's called a green revolving funds, and they are very important tools in use of money, in that a university or an institution can invest in upgrading its infrastructure, and the return on those investments can be as high as 30%.
Yeah, it's double digits. You know, we're part of the $1 billion Green Challenge Fund, and I don't know if Bowdoin is or not, but you should be, because that beats anything you're going to get in the market. It's really a great investment.
You know, one thing I'll add to this is that on the broadest level, what we're all trying to work as quickly as possible to is to get carbon to industries to internalize the cost of their business.
That's right.
So this day is coming, you know, whether it's, and we're trying to make it happen, you know, tomorrow, but the day is coming when they will have to, the market will not be failing the way it is now with carbon. So that they will have to pay for this free dumping of carbon in our oceans, in our atmosphere, and the health costs, etc. When that happens, the market will shift dramatically, and these investments in fossil fuel companies will be terrible investments. And they'll be, people will jump out there. Now, whenever we do this, it's not going to be like flipping a switch. This will be a gradual implementation. So I think it's not crazy, it's not pie in the sky to say that fossil fuel investments will be very soon riskier and riskier investments over time.
No, there's yet another spin on this, and that is that the Brookings Institute produced a study in late 2011 that showed that during the recession, the 2008 recession, while as the economy as a whole faltered and it lost enormous numbers of jobs, the green sector continued to keep on growing with and without the public sector jobs included. So both analyses showed a continuously growing green sector. What's problematic about that study is the vast majority of that sector is held privately. It's not publicly traded. So you're not seeing it in the stock market. You're not seeing it in the returns on investment. But it is there. It is growing by leaps and bounds. It is getting stronger every year, but it's not showing up in the Dow Jones.
We'll do our last question for the day.
Hi, my name is Danny Shediak. I'm president of the Bowdoin Student Government here, and we have actually yet to make a statement about divestment, and I've been trying to learn more. One of the things that our college president recently told us, he came to a meeting actually this past week, was that part of the reason, actually one of the primary reasons, he's not willing to have us divest is because he doesn't think that Bowdoin as a college should be making a political statement about divestment and about fossil fuels. And he has a quote in the Orient saying that, he says, "We are not a political action committee." And so just President Mulkey, as another college president, could you speak to why you believe that is the role of Unity College?
No, absolutely. I think it's the role of all higher education. We have an ethical obligation to future generations. We assume that when you walk in the door and you sit in our classrooms. There's no question that there's a ethical disconnect to be invested in the renewal of civilization through higher education, yet at the same time be putting your money into its destruction. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see higher education in any other form. Higher education is a mission. The idea that Bowdoin is not a political action committee or some kind of political action group, I guess I can buy that as a general blanket statement about higher education, because higher education should be as objective and as detached about long-term trends as it can be. Climate change falls way outside that category. This is the biggest thing there ever was. This is the single biggest challenge to civilization that our species has ever faced. And for any institution that is invested in the public well-being like Bowdoin is, and in training for students to participate in the renewal of civilization, to not have a stand on that strikes me as inconsistent. It strikes me as frankly bizarre. If you look at the opportunity here, I would like to point out an opportunity cost for Bowdoin College. You should be running to this with open arms, because this is your mission. This is what higher education is all about. Higher education is all about sustainability at its core. Now, it's true we've only begun to use that word recently, but this is really what it's been doing for the last 200 years or more. This is why we exist, is to renew civilization and to provide that forward-looking vision of where civilization can go. So, you know, the idea that an institution would celebrate its sustainable operations, yet backpedal its investments, that seems fundamentally incongruous to me. It doesn't make sense. Bowdoin should be flying the flag high and proud. Plant that flag high on the hill and salute it, and be part of it, because this is the future. If you're on this, if you're at the front of this, if you're at the beginning of it, you will be able to lead, and your faculty, your student body, your administration, your board of trustees will all be seen as leaders. And I would think that as an institution with the august reputation of Bowdoin College would be grasping that with both hands and be thrilled to be a part of it.
country. That's not what everybody's saying.